Hello everyone, it's James here. I'm enjoying some nice weather outside, some birds are singing, and we're just having a good time, so let's get into this. We're doing daily devotionals at Willington Church. Each pastor is going to take a day leading up to Easter, and so today we're going to look at a passage in the book of Lamentations, chapter 3. Now, Lamentations, it's an interesting book for a whole lot of reasons. It's one of the last books I read as I was working through my Bible reading plan in my younger years. And I remember quite specifically being kind of in my late teens, reading Lamentations for the first time in a systematic way, and just thinking, wow, what a depressing book this is. Now, if you know a bit about the background of Lamentations, it's written by Jeremiah, who's a prophet who prophesies in the nation of Israel right before the nation goes off into exile. It's a pretty dark time for the nation. It's a pretty sad time for everyone who's involved. And Jeremiah witnesses the demise, the downfall of the nation, and the people being taken off into exile. And he writes about his emotional experience of this in the book of Lamentations. So you can imagine it's quite a depressing book. It starts off with this in chapter 1, verse 1. How lonely sits the city that was full of people. How like a widow she has become, she who was great among the nations. You can hear in that language just this feeling of something great has been lost. And he talks about the downfall of the city, but not only that, he talks about the personal impact that's had on his own life. And listen to this in chapter 3, verse 1. I am the man who has seen affliction, Jeremiah writes. Under the rod of his wrath, he has driven and brought me into darkness without any light. Surely against me he turns his hand again and again the whole day long. And you read through most of Lamentations, and it continues in this way where it's just kind of line after line of these are all the bad things that are happening. This is how awful it makes me feel. But then what's so interesting is you get into the middle of chapter 3, and Jeremiah kind of just switches things up, and there's this change of tone. Listen to what he says in verse 21. In the midst of all this trouble, he says, but this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. Now, I love those lines because, again, they come just right in the midst of all this talk of all the bad things that have happened, all the negativity around him, all the emotional distress that Jeremiah is in. He says, God's mercies are new every morning. And of course, we're in some pretty difficult times right now, and for different people, it's going to affect you differently. For some of us, it's just a heightened sense of anxiety that we feel around the things that are going on. For some of us, it's financial strain, maybe a loss of job or uncertainty about the future. Maybe someone you love or yourself, you're suffering with sickness right now, and you're actually worried about the virus that's going around affecting you personally. Whatever you're going through, I want to just encourage you that God's faithfulness continues. His mercies are new every morning. And I want to focus on that phrase every morning, and encourage you with this challenge. The reality is there's so many things that are vying for our attention, and for most of us, if we're like the average person in this world, first thing we do in the morning is we grab our phone and we check maybe our news feed or social media or whatever that might be. But I want to encourage you in these next 2 weeks leading up to Easter to say, how can I focus on God's mercies and God's faithfulness each morning before anything else? To realize that God's mercies are new every morning. And the reality is there's lots of things that are new every morning. There's lots of bad news that's new every morning. There's lots of challenges we have to face every morning, but God's mercies are new every morning. And I want to encourage you tomorrow morning when you wake up, say, how can I focus on God's mercies and God's faithfulness this morning? That's my challenge to you. I hope you're encouraged by this passage from God's Word.